The history of ancient Egypt is full of theories and speculations about historic events, how rulers were killed, and about the day-to-day life of ancient Egyptians. Though Egypt still remains an enigma for most of us, quite a few questions were answered after some tombs were unearthed. Think about Egypt, and all these images of mummies crawling out of dim-lily pyramids come to mind. But Egypt has quite a few fascinating stories hidden behind its mysterious aura. Read on to know some interesting facts that will definitely transport you back in time. 1. Both Egyptian men and women wore makeup. In the 21st century, male actors wearing makeup is common, but did you know that both male and female Egyptians wore makeup? The eye paint was usually green or black. The makeup served both practical as well as ritualistic purposes. It was thought to protect the eyes from the sun's rays, repel flies, and ward off infection. The dramatic makeup also imitated the facial markings of the sun god Horus. Cosmetics also reflected one's rank in ancient Egypt. A sign of a wealthy woman was a portable cosmetics box. During the reign of Ramses III, laborers quit working because they were not provided with balms and massage oils, which they considered essential for their well-being. 2. Ancient Egyptians invented toothpaste. Of course, there were no dentists back in the day, but ancient Egyptians contributed to innovations in dental hygiene with the invention of toothpaste. Ingredients included a powder of ox hooves, ashes, burnt eggshells and pumice. I guess there's no better way to wake yourself up than with bad breath. Egyptians also believed in the afterlife. That would explain the toothpicks buried alongside mummies, apparently placed there so that they could clean food debris from between their teeth in the afterlife. 3. Egyptian birth control was disgusting. The Egyptians had their own ways of practicing planned parenting. For the time, these were amazing innovations that show the ancient Egyptians had an incredible interest in and understanding of medicine. But that doesn't mean these methods weren't horribly disgusting. Women had a few options for birth control, including different mixtures for contraceptives. Some of the nicer ones involved honey, but the braver women mixed tree leaves and crocodile dung. Then the woman had to stick that concoction inside herself or else deal with 9 months of pregnancy. Men weren't off the hook, though. They had male contraceptives that weren't much better. Men had to rub onion juice onto their foreskins to keep themselves from having kids. It's not clear how many people actually use these contraceptives. But given the choice, the ancient Egyptians had a strong argument for staying celibate. 4. Egyptian fertility tests were disgusting. Egyptians had a whole medical system for giving birth. They had ways to test fertility and pregnancy that were truly advanced for their time and incredibly weird to test fertility. Some doctors would rub oil all over a woman's body and tell her to lie down until the morning. If she looked fresh and good, they ruled that she was fertile. If she didn't, they said she wasn't fertile. Others did something a bit weirder. A doctor would put a clove of garlic or an onion inside a woman's vagina. In the morning, he'd smell her breath. Ancient Egyptians believed that every orifice in a woman's body was linked and that their mouths had tubes that went all the way down. If the doctor could smell the garlic, then the tubes were clear and the woman was fertile. But if the doctor couldn't smell garlic, the tubes were blocked and the woman couldn't give birth. 5. King Tut may have been killed by a hippopotamus. And did pharaohs really marry their sisters? Tutankhamun was an Egyptian pharaoh, who is colloquially referred to as King Tut. Since there are no records of his death, this topic has been the subject of considerable debate. Though there is some speculation that he might even have been assassinated, a CT scan taken in 2005 revealed that he had suffered a leg fracture and that the leg had become infected. Other theories were that a combination of malaria and curler disease II led to his death, or that he died of sickle cell disease. Scans of King Tut's body showed that he was embalmed without his heart or chest wall, which is weird, because it is against traditional Egyptian burial practice. Some Egyptologists believe that King Tut might have been killed by a hippopotamus. Ancient Egyptians hunted the animal for sport, and statues found in King Tut's tomb even depict him in the act of throwing a harpoon. Hippos are known to attack and kill. Some Egyptologists believe that his death might have been the result of a hunt gone wrong. There are several types of research that claim that ancient Egyptians practiced incest. That is, the pharaoh could marry his own sister. This hypothesis stems from the fact that the writings on the ancient Egyptian ruins read sister where wife was supposed to be written instead. Another source of this speculation comes from the ancient Egypt mythology. There are famous episodes when top gods Osiris and Seth each married their respective sister. However, those who oppose this incest theory claim that the word sister had more than one meaning in ancient Egypt, and could mean just a beloved one. Another speculation comes from the experts on the social life in Egypt. They claim that the word sister designated society girls famous for their frivolous manners. 6. In ancient Egypt, people shave off their eyebrows to mourn their cats. People in ancient Egypt worshipped cats as their favorite animals and believed that cats brought good luck to the families they lived with. Bastet, the goddess of the home, cats, and fertility, was depicted either as a cat or as a woman with the head of a cat. Cats were sacred, and anyone who harmed them was sentenced to death. Ancient Egyptian families would mourn the death of a family cat by shaving off their eyebrows. The cat's body was embalmed with a wooden sculpted mask, and a tiny cat mummy was placed in a family tomb or in a cat cemetery. 7. Punishments for breaking the law could be extremely harsh. In ancient Egypt, the crime for stealing in one text is described as 100 blows and 5 wounds, and some studies carried out on skeletons found in Amarna, an ancient Egyptian city, have given researchers reason to believe this may have been a real punishment. They have found skeletons with gashes on the shoulder blade area, and believe the men were not attacked, but were likely being punished and were then sent right back to work. However, while punishments for stealing could be quite harsh, those for crimes of a sexual nature could be much harsher. Women were often treated more strictly, and if a woman was caught cheating, she literally had her nose cut off to spite her face, while a man simply had to take a severe beating of 100 blows. Of course, while this may seem like a double standard, the penalty for a man raping a woman was also very strict. If a man were judged to have raped a freeborn woman, he would be castrated. Like some ancient cultures, many punishments also included the removal of limbs, and execution for serious offenses like grave robbing. 8. Forms of clothing in ancient Egypt. Every time an Egyptian artist in ancient Egypt created or wrote numbers, their proportions were accurately determined by the law of descent. The principles of the effects and simplicity of the ultimate forms in painting, sculpture, and relief developed during the period of the ancient state, the so-called simple canon. However, the classical proportions appear in the figures shown by the pharaohs of the third family. During the 5th and 6th dynasties in the history of the ancient civilization of Egypt, the law of descent became a universal concept. On the basis of that canon of human proportions of a square grid of 18 units were developed and preserved until the end of the 26th dynasty of the New Kingdom. In ancient Egypt, the law of human descent, representing a square grid of 18 units, was related to the standing figure and allowed to reproduce it in different sizes, but always anatomically proportional. A line of 2 facial squares, from the hair growth line to the base of the neck, 10 squares from the neck to the knees, and 6 squares of the knees to the soles of the feet. There was another 19th box, which was used for hair, but was not seen with the rest of the body. It had a square foot and 3.5 squares long. The distance between the ends of the legs in the figure was immobile 4.5 squares, and if moved, 10.5 squares. 9. Some of the richest citizens in ancient Egypt were incredibly fat. While most people would think that the ancient Egyptians were quite thin and muscular, like all societies, the way we look at what is preserved of history can skew our perceptions. Most of what we knew was based on builders and a few rich pharaohs, so it was hard to accurately gauge the true fitness of a person from an ancient society. However, recently remains were found of the pharaoh Hatshepsut, showing that she had been incredibly obese and likely also had diabetes due to her extreme overeating. While it's hard to say because surviving mummies are rare these days, if one rich citizen such as a pharaoh could be fat both socially and in terms of resources, it is quite likely that plenty of other richer, more privileged ancient Egyptian citizens were also fat as well. 10. Egyptian proctologists were called shepherds of the anus. Medicine was a major part of ancient Egyptian culture, and they made some incredible advances for their time. Like we do today, ancient Egyptians had doctors for every body part of the body. They had dentists for their teeth, optometrists for their eyes, and of course, proctologists for their backsides. Or, to translate the Egyptian word for proctologists literally, shepherds of the anus. Proctology had only come so far at the time. So the job of a shepherd of the anus mostly consisted of giving people enemas. Proctologists were specialists who knew exactly how to concoct and administer medications that go up the buttocks and who didn't really do anything else with their time. The Egyptians were proud of their enemas. They even had a whole myth behind them. Enemas, they believed, were developed by the god of Thoth and then passed on to man, making Thoth a sort of Prometheus of the anus.